Coogs house. The Houston Cougars coming off an exciting weekend in which I think they gained a lot of respect from people across the country, in large part due to a dominant defense. But how good is that defense?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Please make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Coogs. We enjoy the conversation but don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below if you're a Scoop Chips fan or a Chip Chips fan. A lot of chips come in both combinations. Which one do you grab off the shelf? Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. More on that later. We've been ingesting that a lot lately here at Locked On Cougs. More on that later, though. Today's show is brought to you again by 5 Hour Energy. Might need another one of those. But we're going to get to a bunch of stuff talking defense in this episode. I'm talking about the secondary. I'm talking about Keith Cooper and how he's, as a pro, really transforming the defensive line. But first and foremost, I think we just kind of talk about all of them as a group. The defense really stood out in a lot of different ways on Saturday after giving up 20 offensive points to UNLV a week ago. Again, a team that's used to scoring a lot more points than that last year in the go-go offense. Houston strolled into Norman, into 83,000 people, loud, screaming Sooners, whatever those things are. Sooners are actually, side note, Boomers and Sooners, those are all cheaters, right? We're all agreed that that's what those are. Okay, either way, the defense strolls into Norman, 83,000 fans, and holds Oklahoma to 2 offensive touchdowns, one of which came shortly after a sudden change play set up Oklahoma's offense inside their own 10-yard line. On the whole, I don't know if anyone in the nation had that prediction coming true. Now, I will say, in full disclosure, that while I had this as a good defense and was predicting a strong defensive effort, I didn't have it being as dominant as it was. I was predicting 24-21 Houston in my most optimistic picking Houston kind of way. But I was picking those 21 points as more traditional offensive drives. Frankly, 1 or 2 of them happening late when the size of Oklahoma just kind of worn down the Houston Cougars. That is not how this game went at all. And I wonder if this is a replicable formula, right? So Houston, by their own count in the post game, talked about having only missed 5 tackles in the game. Pro Football Focus had a little bit different number. Their number keeping can be a little bit wonky at times, but I would say that it was very, very low, regardless whose number you look at. We're looking at a team that, frankly, a year ago was missing 16, 20, 25 tackles in games, in individual games, right? This was a low number. Again, the team is putting out that they think it was about 5 on their own counting. That's incredible. And that's a good defense in any football league. When you factor in losing some talent to the pros like Nelson Caesar, the transfer portal like Don Nwankwo, that's really, really impressive. I think we need to pay attention to Shieldwood's crew here. They got in 2 games of college football this season, they're top 50 in total defense, top 40 in passing yards allowed, top 25 in red zone scoring percentage defensively. They continue to show out, and I would argue against 2 of the better teams and better offenses they're going to see this year. Yes, Oklahoma's offensive line had a couple injuries, and yes, Jackson Arnold is a sophomore. Jackson Arnold is also Gatorade Texas High School Play of the Year from a couple years ago. They have talent up and down the receiver room over there at Oklahoma. The offensive line might have had some shuffling and stuff like that, but they still have all these 4- and 5-star caliber guys that are up in their 5th and 6th year. It's still a strong offense that's going to need to score some points for them this year. Frankly, SEC is not the old SEC defense of 2010. I mean, this is a year where they're going to need to score some points to keep up with the Tennessees and those of the world. And Houston made sure they didn't. And Houston made sure that the offense couldn't get anything moving. I talk a lot about when I have complaints with the Houston offense, but like, what do they hang their hat on? And we talked in Monday's offensive episode about like how that might have been the short pass game that they've developed. I don't think Houston let Oklahoma hang their hat on much of anything. That I think that's the truth is that, like, I don't know that Oklahoma is looking at anything from that film and saying, well, we at least did this thing well. I guess you could argue like the little tight end pop pass worked at two key moments for them, and maybe that set up from a lot of dives that didn't go a whole lot further. But truthfully, that's about the only successful thing that they did offensively was when they needed 4 yards or 3 yards, hit a pop pass for a little bit more than that, and they found ways to get that guy really, really open. And that was just 2 plays, really, at that. I think that when we think of Houston, we think of offense. We think of sexy offensive skill positions, Case Keenum throwing up a bajillion touchdowns, Greg Ward running all over everybody, Tank Dell doing his thing. We think of kickoff returns even. We don't think of defense. We had defensive players come through, right? But whether it's Oliver Hall or whoever, we've had defensive players come through. We just haven't ever thought of it as a dominant defensive team. And I said in the post-game reaction, I'm not sure I'm built for being a fan of a dominant defensive team. I'm an offensive guy. When you're winning a game with a great offense, you're never really feeling out of it because you feel like, oh, we can always score a couple touchdowns before this thing's over, right? Oh, we're down 2 scores in the fourth. Yeah, but we score super fast. This is okay, right? We talk ourselves into being okay with it. When you're winning these short, chippy defensive games, every yard feels agonizing. It's like, oh, man, I don't know how many we're going to score. We can't give up any touchdowns. Like, this is a whole different style of football with the defense leading the way. Now, Shieldwood's crew looks like they're ready to do it as defense coordinator Shieldwood. I think that it's been beyond impressive. They don't do anything that I would classify as I coached high school football for 9 years. I don't think anything looks super tricky or confusing. They're not trying to outsmart offenses necessarily. It's just high-level execution, right? They don't blitz with a bunch of twists and stuff like that to throw you off. They just blitz hard, right? They don't twist and turn and knife and confuse you with a corner here and a safety that. No, they just send a Michael Batten or whomever it may be, Brandon Mack, and they just go 1,000 miles an hour after the football. And that's a level of discipline. It's also a level of, frankly, high energy, high enthusiasm, just playing hard. And it's weird to have a team and to talk about talk about a team playing hard as like a top-end skill. But it does feel like that's kind of what's developing, is that the culture on the defense side of the ball is about playing really hard, and that might be their best asset. Now, I don't mean to say that they aren't big, strong, fast. They've got guys that are big, strong, fast, right? I mean, Carlos Allen has done a great job at starting nose tackle this year. He's listed at 6'1", 295. You told me he was 300, I'd believe you, right? Keith Cooper, 6'5", 280. On the backfield, you've got AJ Haulcy's 6', 215. Latrell McCutchin, 6'1", long-armed, 180. Kristen Davis is 6 foot, $190. Like, these guys aren't little, but they are, I think, playing above their weight class a number of different ways. And, it'll be a Rice week all week. We're talking about ruck fights and those kind of things. I think that as we look at this week with Rice, I don't think it's crazy to think that they don't score. I really don't. And this is a Rice team that's given Houston problems the last couple of years, a Rice team that scored a bajillion points thus far. But Houston's defense is really that kind of good. Now I got to dive into the film more this week. I'll do more exploring throughout it this week, and I'll figure out more about it. But ultimately, I think we're looking at that kind of a defense where, like, if they're going to win some games, it's going to be because other teams don't score 15 points. I mean, after all, top 15 Oklahoma barely did. Now, I want to talk about some individuals. I want to talk about Keith Cooper potentially being a pro in that group. But first, I can talk about I'm not a video game guy anymore until this game came out. Now, I used to really love the old PS2 games, stuff like that. But Locked On Coogs fans, you got to take a moment to explore Ultimate College Football HC. I think you're going to love it as much as I do. This game is amazing. It's a great simulation to get you to step in the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine being like Coach Fritz and coaching the Cougs? This is that kind of a game for you. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling all kinds of school scholarships, you are very much you're in a crucial role handling every single detail of your program. Can you handle that pressure? Here's what I really love about the game. I'm an offensive guy. You are responsible for calling all the plays in the game. Your strategy will not only determine your success, but will shape the future and the legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is the completely free, no ads, 100% playable offline college football video game. You can play on the go as you want to, when you want to. And of course, we have special for you, Locked On Coogs fans. Use code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store, and receive a free boost for your program. We're going to make sure you take advantage of this perk as we'll get your team off to a strong start. Down the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your college coaching legacy today. All right, so depth charts came out on Monday, and we'll talk about some different things on the defense backfield later. One thing that's never going to change this season, so long as he is healthy, is Keith Cooper is your starting defensive end. They got a couple different positions they're going with this year. They're calling the opposite sides end / linebacker hybrid type, a dog. They got the nose tackle and the nose guard, and those have a little bit different roles. One's more of a B gap player, one's more of an A gap player. But regardless, you cannot line this team up without Keith Cooper. Keith Cooper came in as one of the highest PFF ranked performers from last weekend for Houston. I would point out that he also had 4 hits on the quarterback in the Oklahoma game. Really, really important. 5 hits on the quarterback in total in the Oklahoma game. He had 52 pass rushes. It's about 1 out of 10 times y'all call a pass, and he's rushing that he's getting hands on the quarterback. I want to stress that that's really good. I want to also stress that that's really good when he's the highest profile and named pass rusher on Houston, meaning that he's getting the double teams, the chips, the blocks, everything coming out of it. All your scheme about keeping somebody off the quarterback would be aimed at keeping him off the quarterback, and Oklahoma still couldn't seem to do it. He also, for what it's worth, lined up against a traditional starter, Oklahoma. They had some changing up of the guard inside, no pun intended, guys inside, but that did not impact where Keith Cooper was rushing. He had a total of 16, or the defensive line, I should say, had a total of 16 hurries on the day. He contributed 5 of those pressures. I think Keith Cooper, and I mentioned this in the offseason, a couple of you commented telling me I was a little crazy, but I think Keith Cooper is turning himself into a first 3-round NFL draft pick. 6'5", 280, good arm length. I'll be interested to see what he measures out like that at the combine with. And he's eligible for the draft this spring. And I it's not that I'm like wanting to push him out the door. I frankly wish he could play in like 4 years at Houston, if I'm being completely honest. But Cooper, and we'll at some point, I think when the season's over and that kind of stuff, talk to NFL draft people because I'm interested in what their thoughts are. I think he might have been a pro at Tulane, if I'm being really honest. Came over from Tulane with Willie Fritz, and I think his impact on this defense is so, for a guy that loves trench stuff in the football game, is so visible that you have to give him his flowers. I would point out that, Houston's dominant defense has a bunch of players involved. And Keith Cooper is not the kind of guy that'd be saying me by any stretch. But having him out there makes people's job in the front 7 visibly easier. It just does. He takes up the double. He takes up the chips. He takes up the tight ends. He takes up the reads. and it makes everyone else get a one-on-one job. And that's a whole lot easier football game, especially when Keith Cooper wins his reps anyway. Now, I'm not sure he's a top 10 pick like Ed Oliver was. Ed Oliver's one of one, right? But I do think it's reminiscent in the way that it impacts his teammates, right? The way that it makes everyone else's job easier feels like watching Ed a few years back. And I, again, who knows how the rest of the year goes? Maybe he does turn himself into a top 10 pick, and I'm a crazy person. I would happily be that crazy person. Prove me wrong. Happily. But regardless, I think he's a pro, and I think that you're seeing it play out in how everyone else's job is becoming so much easier. Now, he's not, again, the only defensive lineman worth anything. I thought Carlos Allen at nose tackle absolutely destroyed his assignment. He absolutely obliterated the center last week from Oklahoma. I don't remember the kid's name. Kid probably needs to change his name after what Carlos Allen did to him. He cannot find a job again. I mean, Carlos Allen had a really, really good day. Admittedly, he got a lot of single blocks because of stuff like I mentioned happening with Keith Cooper. And I also think that the center was one of the guys kind of mixed up in the shucking and jiving, making up for injuries inside. But regardless, Carlos Allen at 6'1", 295 looked like a blur. And that's really hard to do when you're 6'1", 295. Really, really impressive getting into the backfield. Did a great job fighting with his arms and hands to get into that backfield. Thought he was really impressive. As impressive a guy as Houston had, the X's and O's of myself still lent the game ball of sorts over to Keith, but I think I could make a case for Carlos Allen having it. I think the more popular one, because of the times his name was called, is Michael Batten. Now we're moving back from the D-line to linebackers, I guess, but Batten did have a gigantic sack at the end of the game that felt like it might give Houston a shot to win that game. The sack was pretty big there late, but he also had 6 solo tackles and an assist. Didn't have any missed tackles. Played Mike linebacker, meaning he's in the scrum on every single one of those run plays. Oklahoma was trying to force feed the running backs that had nothing. Michael Batten, we talked about some before the season, 6'1", 220, journeyman, been to legitimately, I think, like 17,000 schools, seven schools. And I think we're all happy that he's having success here. This is not the kind of guy that was like necessarily overlooked coming out of high school. That's not to say that he maybe shouldn't have gotten a better deal out of high school, but it is to say that he's worked his way up very clearly. Like, it's not that no one saw this guy play before. It's that he's gotten better throughout his long college career, admittedly elongated by some external factors, injuries, COVID, etc. But he took advantage of all those and has gotten better at football and is now the middle linebacker for a top 50 defense in all of FBS football, right? I think that's worth praising. Another guy, if we're just shouting guys out, Jamal Morris got inserted in the starting lineup last week. Jamal played well last year as a rotational guy, was a rotational guy in game one, inserted in the starting lineup last week. Had his own impressive day, as my voice slowly leaves me talking about it. I do think he's earned continuing to be that starter. They're going to continue to rotate guys through, right? Kendrick Gant will get to play some, right? I don't mean to say that defensive positions rotate a lot because you need to be fresh on that side of the ball. I want to see more out of him in coverage. That is Jamal Morris. I think he's great in the box as a Mike linebacker, but Mike linebackers can get some difficult assignments. And depending on what was called, you could argue those tight end pop passes that one scored a touchdown and one got a big-time first down for Oklahoma. You could argue that Mike was the defender assigned to the tight end. I think they were blitzing, and so it actually might have been Kentrell Webb, the other safety. But regardless, I just want to see Jamal involved in more of that pass coverage kind of stuff a little bit more. But he's really good in the box. So rundown situations, blitzing the Mike linebacker situations, he's really, really talented. And so I think he's worth keeping an eye on there. As we move into the defensive backfield and kind of talk about what those guys are doing so well, I think the list starts into the one guy. We'll get to that in a second. But first, as you can probably hear in my voice, I've been battling some things. I'm a little bit under the weather. But again, teacher, coach, podcaster, no time for real rest there. And that means I got to find a way to get energy. And the way to tackle that to-do list that I have all day, every day is with 5-hour energy, because 5-hour energy fixes tired fast. We have a long list of to-do things for work, or this is DIY projects tackle at home, or a bunch of different jobs like myself. Take a 5-hour energy shot so you can check everything off of your list. If you're like me, you'll always have a large list of projects to do. When you get your supplies for the project, do not forget to grab the most essential supply, which is a 5-hour energy shot with zero sugar and a convenient portable size, the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com. Get some 5-hour energy product today. You can use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Code is not going to subscription orders, but go use code LOCKEDONCFB at 5hourenergy.com today. So the defensive secondary is the one spot on the defense that did have a substitution flip. It looks like on the depth chart that Johnny Carter is at the backup corner spot with Kristen Davis getting the start. On the opposite side, Latrell McCutchin will still be the starting corner with Jeremiah Wilson listed as his backup. I imagine you see all four a lot in this game. All four played very well against Oklahoma. I was a little bit surprised that they decided to go with Kristen Davis instead of Jeremiah Wilson starting opposite Latrell, based on Wilson having a pick in the last game, and frankly, another one taken away by penalty as well. Kristen Davis did have a strong game. Per Pro Football Focus, he was in the right place, the right time, 74% of the snaps. He was on the field. For a corner, that is vital to have that number above a 70, and he was. He also, would point out for what it's worth, did a pretty good job in tackles, had no misses. So I think that kind of is what fueled some of that move. On the whole, though, I don't think Johnny Carter is not going to play. As I mentioned, I think he's really just going to be rotated through a lot more. You saw a lot of these corners and defensive backs, whether it's Haulcy got the start, but you still saw Gaston play called in safety spots. Hersh McLaurin had some big time plays and pass breakups. But again, Gaston's listed as his backup. We saw Gaston in the field in some run type situations as well. I think across the board, you're going to see a lot of these guys rotating through. What I'm excited to see, though, is after watching the Oklahoma game, I think it's safe to say Latrell McCutchin is a lockdown type of corner. We saw after UNLV when he covered Ricky White, and there was a big-time Ricky White play called back on a holding call from UNLV. But besides that, Latrell McCutchin pretty much locked him down. That play got called back for holding. So really, statistically speaking, Latrell did not give up a big play to Ricky White, right? I think we can all safely say that. Was not necessarily what we saw coming. And I'll be nice about that, but Ricky White's like a top 2-round pick in the NFL draft this spring. And Latrell McCutchin locked him down. And I think there were some people wondering, like, okay, is that a one-time thing? New quarterback at UNLV, maybe something's going on with them not being as good as we thought they were. A, they scored a bajillion points in week 2. But B, I think after watching him play against Oklahoma, we kind of understand that might just be more about who Latrell McCutchin is. Again, in coverage, he was targeted 5 times, only allowed 1 catch for 33 yards. Admittedly, it was 33 yards, but only 1 catch and 5 targets is a big deal. I would also point out that he's frequently matched up with some of the highest-end performers in the team. I think the kid's name is Dion from Oklahoma. He is talented, but Latrell locked him up. Latrell did very well in that game. And frankly, there was probably a little bit something extra on the table for Latrell McCutchin going into that one as well. If you don't recall, Latrell McCutchin started his college career at Oklahoma. When Lincoln Riley left to go to Los Angeles, play coach at USC, McCutchin followed him there. Did not like Los Angeles. He needed to get back closer to home. Latrell is originally from Austin. His brother, Latrevion, is a linebacker, and his brother committed to Houston, so he transferred back to play with his brother at Houston. Last year, he was forced to sit the year out on a second-year transfer rule that was in place then, but frankly is no longer in place and seems kind of unfair. And so McCutchin is back playing, and frankly playing like the high-end power forward kind of corner that we thought he could be. What impresses me the most about McCutchin and his coverage through 2 games is, so he's 6'1" and really long arms, and he used that length to his advantage a lot. He keeps guys an arm's length away, but because his arms are so long, that arm's length away allows him space to flip his hips as fluidly as the receiver at times, it seems. And frankly, it kind of gives him more room to react, even if by a few inches, which is important. We call football the game of inches so often, right? And so I think he's technically very sound, but honestly, it's a combination of combining those technical skills with some God-given gifts. I mean, I have short arms, right? Like I am about 6 feet tall and short arms. That's just what people are built differently. So he uses the gifts he's got to help enhance really strong technique. He's a really, really talented corner. And frankly, we talk about guys going pro. He's certainly on the short list of guys who I think has a shot on this defense to play at the next level on Sundays. I guess next level could also be in Canada, but I think the Troy's got a real shot at Sundays in the NFL. Other guy in the secondary I think has that shot is AJ Haulcy. Now, AJ Haulcy played, I guess, technically more free safety by alignment in this game. I'd say he was frequently higher up at the top of the box as opposed to in the middle of it in this game. But on the whole, I look at what Haulcy was able to do as nothing short of strong. He is as good a safety in the run game as I've seen Houston have. And it's year 2 of it, so I feel confident saying that. When he hits you, it is like he is really trying to perfectly legally hurt you. I mean, he hits people so hard and wants to hit everyone so hard. And I know this is old school, and I know this feels kind of like Palomalu, Ed Reed, insert Hall of Famer guy there from the 90s and early 2000s. But that is the kind of thing I think you think of when you think of like, jaw-dropping safety plays, guys that come across the middle and they get lit up. Well, the guy lighting them up is a guy like AJ Haulcy at 6'2", 215. What I could see happening, frankly, for AJ is a pro system might say, hey, I need you to lose 5 or 10 pounds, so I got to have you run more because the big hits aren't as big as they used to be 20 years ago. But as an old school guy, when it comes to football, again, I love line play. I love running the ball. I like high scoring, but I want to do it through running. AJ Haulcy is that like 2002 premier in safety, and he's finding a way to make plays on this football team. And I mentioned the only 2 successful plays I could say that Oklahoma had were little pop passes in very crucial situations. And I think Haulcy got dinged in your analytics stuff for being the guy closest to the tight ends on those as the technical free safety. And he's listed the starting free safety this week. I don't mean to throw another safety under the bus. I think those were actually Kentrell Webb's assignments. If that was Halsey's assignment, that's a long way to go based on his pre-snap alignment to where that tight end up catching the ball. But I also know the coaching huddle that he might have been aligned wrong for all I know, right? And maybe Oklahoma knew if we line up like this, he'll line up over there and we can take advantage of it. They practice too. But on the whole, I think, save those 2 plays, he kind of played a perfect game. And like I said, I don't know if those plays weren't necessarily his fault. I'm not in their huddle. AJ, I would love to hear from you if you hear this and think that it wasn't your bad, or if you want to hear this and own it and explain what happened. I get it, right? Thought he played a great game, and he if you thought he hit those Oklahoma guys hard, kid from the city of Houston in the Bayou Bucket this weekend, he he could kill a kid from Rice. like it could be bad. And I love these make the move to free safety. We'll talk more about that throughout the season, I'm sure. So, with that said, we continue to preview Rice each and every day this week. More exciting things to come for Houston as we get closer to basketball season. We get all kinds of fun stuff happening. Locked On Coogs coming at you each and every day this week, even as I'm a little bit under the weather, even as chaos is happening outside, apparently. All kinds of things happening, but we are still bringing it. Locked On Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.